Hi everyone. So in this video, I want to show you how to simplify the square root of a positive number. Okay. Um, okay. So let's get started. Okay. So before I want to talk about square root. Okay. I was simplifying square root. Okay. So I want to say that if I give you a square root of 20, so in algebra, this symbol is called the square root, and usually there is a it's called square root because there is a root of 2 here, but we don't write the root 2 for square root. Okay. For square root, you just leave it alone. You just drop the root 2. Okay. You don't usually write the root 2. Okay. And however, if you were a cube root, like you will see the 3, the cube root, so instead of 20. So if it was the fourth root, you will see the fourth root. Okay. And also, what I wanted to say here is in algebra, the number inside the square root, okay, we call it the radicand. Okay, we call it the radicand, and the symbol for also the way you name the square root, there is we can call it also the radical symbol or the radical sign or just a radical. Okay, radical of 20. Okay, so that's a two new word. Radicand is whatever is inside the square root, you call that the radicand. And the square root can also be called the radical. Okay, Radical. Okay, so thank you for listening. So let's move on to simplifying the square root. So if I ask you to simplify the square root of 0, okay, so what would you tell me? Okay, so remember you want to find one number do I square and I get 0. So can you write 0 as a square? Yeah, 0 is square, is 0 squared. Okay, and what does the square root does? The square root undo the square. So the square kind of eat the square here. So you end up with 0. Okay, or you can ask yourself, what number do I multiply by itself and I get 0? Is 0. Okay, and also I want also to address something I forgot to tell you is, okay, the square roots of a number, right? The square roots can also be written as a fraction. I mean, as an exponent. Okay, I can rewrite the square root as the exponent of 1/2. That's the reason why I say that the exponent, the square eats up the square, or the square eats the exponent. What I'm trying to say is 4 can be written as 2 squared. Okay, and then you can multiply by. Okay, you have a power raised to another power, so you have to multiply the exponent. So 2 times 1/2 is what? It's 1, right? So this simplifies to just 1, and then 2 to the first power is just 2. Okay, so that's why I say that when you can write the radicand as a square, okay, so the square root of the perfect square is going just to be the base. Okay, so we write this number as a square and just use the base. That would be the square root. Okay. Okay, I hope I'm wasn't confusing, but let's try. Look, the more we do, the better we get at it. What is the square root of 9? Okay, so what number do you multiply by itself to get 9? You say it's 3, right? Or you can also write it as 3 squared. And I told you the property of square roots is the square root undo the square. Okay, so this basically the square root is going to take care of the square, so you end up with 3. Okay, so now the third one, example, this what is the square root of 36? Okay, what number do you multiply by itself? You get 36. The answer is 6, right? 6 times 6 is 36. Number 4 is, let me give you, what is the square root of 81? So what number do I multiply by itself and I get 81? It's 9, okay? And So what I gave you here was the square root. The radicand here is the radicands are perfect square. 0 is a perfect square, 9 is a perfect square, 36 is a perfect square, 81 is also a perfect square. Okay, so that's why they come out as what? Rational number. Okay, so what do I call those numbers rational? If it's not a fraction, is that any whole number or integer can be written as a fraction by doing what? You can draw a line and draw a 1 under. Okay, now they are fraction. Okay, so we call those numbers rational numbers. Okay? Because they can be written as a ratio. There's a word ratio popping out. Okay, so now let me give you another example. Okay, so number 5. What is the square root of 3? Okay, 3 is not a perfect square, and if I was supposed to use a calculator and compute the square root, okay, square root of 3, okay, you will see that the decimal keeps on is 1.7320 blah blah blah. So it decimal keeps on going forever, but because the calculator can take up to a certain digit amount of number, okay, so that's why stop. The last digit is 8, right? But usually, like, so square root of 3 is not rational. It's irrational. A number like pi. Why? Because its decimal keeps on going forever and never repeats. Okay, and we so to be exact with the number, you're going to leave it as square root of 3. Okay, you're not going to approximate the number. Okay, so if I ask you, okay, what is the square root of 5? What would you say? Okay, yeah, it's square root of 5. Just leave the square root alone. When the radicand is not the perfect square, just leave it. Okay, so now how do we call this kind of number? Okay, this number cannot be turned as a ratio. Okay, and the name for it is irrational. Irrational numbers. Okay, and I wanted to say that, okay, the set of real numbers, okay, the set of real numbers. So real numbers are made of, real numbers include what? Real and numbers include rational number, okay, as well as irrational numbers. Okay, I think this is nice to know. Okay, so I show you by simplifying square root of a perfect square. Okay, we get a rational number. When the square root here is the radicand is not the perfect square, like 3 and 5, it's an irrational number. Okay, so next I'm going to show you another example, okay, of a square root of a positive number, okay, but that is not a perfect square, but you can see it simplified. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. So let's move on to a new kind of example. I'm going to draw 2 lines. It's not going to be the same as above, but it's similar to it. So the first one is, how do we simplify the square root of 8? Okay, 8 is, the radicand is 8. 8 is a positive number, okay? 8 is not a perfect square. However, right, I can rewrite 8 as a square, as factor of a perfect square. So can you think of two numbers you multiply together, you get 8, in which one of them is a perfect square? Yeah, you're right. You're going to have the number 4 and 2. 4 times 2 multiplied to 8. And we know that 4 is a perfect square. And I'll show you how to identify perfect square in my last video. Perfect square, okay? So now you can rewrite this as square root of 4 times square root of 2. So you can split the single square root in two parts. Why? Because the operation used is multiplication. Multiplication. Can you do it if it was plus addition? Never, never, never. You only do this when it's multiplication or division. Okay, and I'll show you an example of division later on. So now what do we know? We know that the square root of 4 is what number? Okay, what number do we multiply by itself? You get 4, or do we squared and you get 4 is 2, and then times square root of 2. You leave it alone because 2 is not a perfect square, so leave the square root of 2 alone. So you can simplify as 2 square root of 2. Okay, so that's the final answer. Okay, so how do I simplify the square root of 8? Okay, so we wrote 8 as a factor, as 2 factors, okay, where one of those factors is a perfect square, okay. Then I split the square root or the radical in 2. Why? Because the operation uses multiplication, okay, so we can do that. They're equal. So now I will simplify the square root of 4 as 2, and the square root of 2, I will leave it alone. And my final answer is square root of 2 times square root of 2. Okay. So if you wanted to go back, let's say you wanted to go back, sorry, you wanted to start with 2 square root of 2, right? So you have 2 square root of 2, and you want me to prove that it's equal to 8. Okay, or square root of 8. Okay, how would you do this? So what you want to do is, let me show you. Square root of 2 is square root of 2, right? And here you have times, if you don't do the operation between two terms of multiplication. And now 2, I want to write 2 as a square root, okay? So what number do I write as a radicand? Okay, so what number do I take the square root? Do I get 4? How do I get that number? You have to make sure you square it. Okay, so now we get 4, and those two square roots can be written as a single square root, and you end up with 4 times 2 is 8. Okay, how do I get this? So I do 4 times 2 is 8, and square root of 8 is equal to square root of 8. So I just wanted to show you backward, going to another way, another direction. Okay, so now let's do another one. So can you simplify square root of 18? Okay, please pause the video and try. Okay, so square root of 18, the factor square root of 18 is 9 times 2, okay? I can split the factor into 2, so square root of 9 times square root of 2, and I know that the square root of 9 is a perfect square, so square root of 9 is 3, and then square root of 2 is going to be square root of 2. So square root of 18 is equal to 3 times square root of 2. That's the final answer. Okay, so how do I do this? So remember, we write the positive number, the radicand, as two factors, where one is a perfect square. Okay, so if you don't know what are the factors are, one strategy I use is, okay, let's say if I give you a number like with 3 digits, I will say try to find all the prime factor of that number, okay? And I'm going to show you that in the next video, okay? But for this, if it's just a single digit, some of you have very great number sense, so you can right away and knowing that, okay, 18 can be written as a factor of 9 and 2, okay? So if not, in the next video, I'm going to show you how to identify the factor for number greater, like with more than, like higher numbers, okay? I will show that in the next video. Okay, thank you for watching my videos. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.